Welcome back to the safe house. All right, I had to take a little day off of talking politics. I'm gonna try to not spend too much time today on it. USAID. We got to touch on this though. So overnight, Trump and DOGE, Elon Musk, shut it down. Just shut it down. And of course, you got all kinds of different feedback, and the left, of course, was just completely pissed off. And here's what happens. Everybody that dislikes Trump, all of the left, all of the extremist left anyway, I know there are still rational thinking Democrats out there. It can just be hard to spot them at times. But here's what happens. As soon as Trump does something against the current, which both the left and the right, you have people for a long time saying, we want an outsider, we want change, right? Like Obama, the whole Obama thing, which of course nothing really fucking changed. So somebody like Trump comes along, a true outsider, and they're just obliterated by the media. And all these followers, and I hate to call them that, but all these people that really, I don't want to say they don't think for themselves, but they don't educate themselves on anything. They tune into their party's media outlet, because it happens on the right too with Fox News. They tune into their media outlet, they see what other morons are saying, and then they just regurgitate it. It's fucking embarrassing. I would be embarrassed. And then they just regurgitate the same shit. And they don't ever research anything for themselves. So, USAID, I've heard, RFK Jr. has been talking about this for a while. This is one of the reasons why I really like RFK Jr. I've heard a lot of people really dislike RFK Jr. And you know what? If somebody listens to what he says, they take the time to actually hear the other side, understand what he stands for, and they still don't like him, well, hey, that's fine. But there again, they hear paid liberal journalists paid to regurgitate and puke out propaganda. They listen to them talk shit about the guy, and then they've made up their mind. Again, listen to what he says, do your research, do your due diligence, and dislike him. That's different. But he's been talking about the corruption in USAID for a long time. For a couple of years. And I've listened to him talk about it, long before this happened. So when they shut it down, I was a little skeptical at first. It's like, shut it down overnight, There is some good that it does. They are helping some poverty-stricken areas feed people. So I didn't react right away. I wanted to research it a little bit. I wanted to hear it out. And I have to say, it's like Elon Musk said, and there again, somebody that's very disliked by the left now. Elon Musk said in 2016, he voted for Biden. Or was it 2020? He voted for Biden. But being, I think, a critical thinker, he saw what was going on. He's like, well, shit, I'm not going to vote for that again. So I don't dislike Musk. I think he's a pretty fascinating, intelligent person. Perfect? No, I think he's human. I don't think that he's a superhero. I think he's human, but he's obviously not an idiot. I will say that looked an awful lot like a Roman and or Nazi salute. But I don't think, I personally don't think, even if he had those, opinions about National Socialism, I really have my doubts he would come out and do that. So I think that he was throwing his heart out to people, and or maybe he knows something about the National Socialist Party that most Americans don't. And they're, again, the same Americans that just listen to one source of information and never do any research for themselves, because not everything we were taught about the National Socialists was accurate and or at the very least complete. So but Elon and his team said it best, I think, when said this wasn't, an apple with a worm in it or whatever. This was a bowl full of worms. So maybe it was best to shut it down and start over. And I read an article. I read part of an article. I heard somebody comment about it on YouTube video that they were not going to shut off or cut off aid to Haiti. And in fact, they were going to increase aid to Haiti. They shut down USAID, which was giving some money to Haiti, but they're not just cutting off aid to all of these areas. They're just not doing it through a completely corrupt system or channel, if you will. USAID has been a tool of the CIA for a long time. The USAID program was not what it used to be when, I believe by executive order, JFK implemented this program. I don't believe it was congressional. I believe it was executive, but really not that important probably. So we can't just, when this happens, we start missing the point to things. When your objective becomes to just bash a president and or his cabinet or party, talk about taking steps backwards. Talk about taking steps backwards, I don't agree with everything Trump does, but we have to look at individual decisions, specific decisions, whether it's Republican or Democrat, if we want to make any progress. People say, there used to be a time when the left and right used to work together, and I miss those days. And that same person will just, as soon as Trump does something drastic, they just use it as an excuse because of their own ego. They don't ever want to admit that he might do something right, even though he's done things that you disagree with. They don't ever want to admit he might do something right. God forbid. God forbid. Hold on, excuse me real quick here. So, I'm going to read something here. This is absurd. Now, assuming this is correct, and I believe this is probably correct. Before Trump ever came along, I would read books about CIA plans. I listened to, I forget his name right now, the author of, an economic hitman, a guy that worked for the CIA, and his job was to go sabotage and indebt economies and countries. And I understand that not everybody has researched this stuff so broadly. I researched and studied assassinations in the United States, JFK, RFK, MLK, Malcolm X. There was there was the attempted assassination of Reagan. There was a period of time in the United States that these things were happening, and these assassinations were taking place in a relatively short amount of time. Call it a decade, less than a decade. And it was like, man, when you look at them, there's some real similarities between these assassinations. They're always done by this deranged lone gunman, and there were major power plays going on. I've studied what the CIA's role has been in the United States, the Iran-Contras, the crack epidemic in the United States, the smuggling of cocaine into the country, Pablo Escobar, the Ochoa brothers, Mena, Arkansas, we had nearly 20 years where all of our presidents were from southern coastal states and had been governors of those countries states prior to, and it wasn't even necessarily intentional, but I started getting pieces of the puzzle here, and things just started to make sense. So when I heard RFK Jr. say that USAID was corrupt and the tool of the CIA and that its role was not what it used to be, I did some research, but that made sense. I was like, man, that's not too hard to believe. So listen to this. $1.5 million to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion in Serbia's workplaces and business communities. $70,000 for production of a DIA musical in Ireland. These are your tax dollars. $2.5 million for electric vehicles for Vietnam. $47,000 for a transgender opera in Colombia. Look, think what have your opinions about transgenderism. This is not about condemning transgenderism. This is about whether or not our tax dollars, without any say from us, should fund a flippin' opera, transgender opera in Colombia. Should it fund any kind of opera in Colombia? That just seems strange to me. $32,000 for a transgender comic book in Peru. $2 million for sex changes and LGBT activism in Guatemala. Furthermore, never were you asked if you wanted to fund this. Now, maybe you would, but the question, I think, should come up at some point. $6 million to fund tourism in Egypt. Tourism. Huh. I mean, in all fairness, I'd let them make their case, except for nobody ever did. Do you remember that being on CNN or MSNBC or Fox News, whichever you listen or watch? And or coming up, a politician reaching out to a media outlet and saying, hey, we want to know what our constituents think about spending $6 million of their tax dollars on tourism in Egypt. Hundreds of thousands of dollars for a nonprofit linked to designated terrorist organizations, even after an inspector general launched an investigation. Millions to EcoHealth Alliance. Some of these things may be for a good cause, but we have to ask, not only do we want our tax dollars to go to these things, but what does it have to do with national security? What does it have to do with good, positive relationships in regards to foreign policy, the United States and these other countries? I heard there was a $47 million gas station funded in Afghanistan by USAID. These are just a few examples. So my question would be to all the criticism in this particular situation by the left, maybe some by the right. Have you did you look into the other side of this, or did you just hear Trump did something, and because of your, what do they call it, Trump deranged syndrome, you just saw this as a reason to bash him instead of looking into it, thinking critically? Maybe you would still feel the same way, but did you look into the other side of this? So here's one of the problems nowadays. Maybe it's always been a problem and it's just worse now, or maybe not. Maybe it's just always been a problem. But here's one of the problems is nobody has any fucking humility anymore. Nobody's capable of saying, you know what? I think I might have been wrong about that. Maybe I disagree with Trump in most cases, but this, I think he did a good job there. No, it's like they just have to hate him and every decision he makes. What kind of progress are we going to make as an American? And I'm using, it sounds like I'm bashing the left right now, and I am. Not all of the left, but just the idiots on the left. But in a different situation, in the last administration, I'd be bashing the right, okay? It only comes out this way right now because we have overwhelmingly Republicans swept 2024. And I think there's a reason for that. The House, the Senate, presidential, the executive just fucking swept everything. Popular, everything. And I had more faith in this electoral process, because for the first time, not for the first time was there questions about the integrity of our voting process, but for the first time a president put his foot down and demanded that it be challenged. I heard a lot of criticism when it came to Trump challenging the electoral process. And there's a lot of evidence that shows a bunch of horse shit went down. Was this the first time? No, it wasn't. There have been questions about elections in the United States as long as there have been elections in the United States. But for the first time in a long time, Trump challenged them. He didn't just bend over and take it up the tailpipe. So it's just the left under the spotlight right now. But when it is the left in office and or the majority in the House or the Senate, or you'll hear me say the same thing. Be critical of the right, but nobody has the humility. Excuse me, I'm not going to say nobody. It seems like most people don't have the humility to accept that maybe Trump will do something correct or good for the United States. I most definitely wanted Trump over Biden or Kamala. Most definitely. Would Kamala have been a better president than Biden? I think that's very possible. She had her cognitive abilities about her. But I was very critical, nor did I want to go down that road, because she was a part of an administration that was a complete failure. Absolute disastrous. And she was the border czar to a border that was an absolute failure. The vice president doesn't have to have a whole lot of responsibility, but rather, I think, be a tie-breaking vote in the House or in the Senate. But she was tasked with the border, and the border was an absolute failure. Has anybody seen that video of her? She's being interviewed. I forget by who. And they bring up, this the fact that she was the border czar, and asked if she'd been to the border, and she said, "Well, I've not been to Europe either." It was the most asinine response. It was just absolutely ridiculous. Nor would she refused to vote against, in California now. This is unbelievable. I can't even believe this right now. You can, in California, you can go shoplift in a store, and if it's not, the value isn't more than a certain amount, the police won't even respond. There's videos all over the internet of people just walking into a store, some of them with their faces covered with a COVID mask, filling up a grocery cart or a shopping cart, and just walking out of the store because they know the police won't respond. This is fucking madness. Anybody that believes this is okay, look, I'll get on board with this so long as the store owner or employees of the store are allowed to shoot that person. If we want to make that okay, and make it okay that through violence and or force, a property owner can protect their property and belongings, then okay, I guess I'm on board. Let them hire their own security and let that security guard shoot somebody when they decide to just blatantly steal. Otherwise, I think that we should have professionals and law enforcement required to respond to this. And Kamala would not. From what I understand, she would not oppose this. So no, I don't think Kamala would have made a good president. I think she would have been just an extension of the absolute fucking disaster we saw with Biden. No offense, Biden. Sorry. There's a reason why you ran for president in previous years and made it nowhere. You made it nowhere. Maybe you did some good things in office in your political career. I'm sure you did. But nobody thought you would be a good president before. You weren't a good president when you were. You didn't win that election. And so what we see now is just, these people that have hardly any ability to think for themselves, and they just listen to the media bash Trump because he was an outsider. Now there's no way he's going to do anything right. They're not going to admit to themselves. It's their egos. They're not going to allow their egos to, or their ego isn't going to allow them to admit when Trump might do something right. And this is a sad place for the United States. This is a sad place to be. People should be happy that there has been created some kind of oversight. What is wrong with the Department of Government Efficiency? There again, it's the creation of Trump and Elon Musk. And so, because they've already committed to hating these people, well, if they're responsible for it, it has to be a horrible idea. This is a good idea. The government should run efficiently. It affects our lives as Americans directly. I just listened to Rubio say, we are not going to stop helping the world. We're just going to do it differently through a different organization, so that your tax dollars don't fund direct corruption, so that it doesn't fund transgender operas in Colombia. What responsibility do we have as Americans to a transgender opera in Colombia? Am I not Am I living in the fucking Twilight Zone? It feels just like that at times. You know, here's a good example of how we need to hold our politicians accountable. When I heard Trump come out and say, and I do support Trump in most of what he's doing. When I heard him come out and say, I want Gaza and we're going to turn it into really great real estate, what the fuck are you talking about, Trump? What are you talking about? This is horrible. I didn't doubt for a second this was going to happen. I called it, actually. The Greater Israel Project, that's what October 7th was about. That's what turning Gaza into fucking rubble was all about. And I absolutely disagree. What I would like to have heard Trump say was, we are going to rebuild Gaza with the billions of dollars that we've saved with shutting USAID down, and with the billions of dollars we are going to save not funding a fucking avoidable war in Ukraine with Russia because Biden and Boris Johnson and their war dogs shut down the Minsk peace accord. We're going to rebuild Gaza and give it back to their rightful owners. That's what I wanted to hear Trump say. And I'm very disappointed to hear that that's not what is going to happen. So I'm curious to see how this progresses. And if you're listening to this, Trump, which I doubt you are, shame on you. Shame on Biden for allowing Gaza to be turned into a gravel pit. We fund Israel. I'd like to see that stop too. We fund Israel. Israel does not exist in the capacity that it does without U.S. funding. And shame on you, Trump, for putting your eye on a piece of great real estate for people of the world. How about fucking real estate for the people of Gaza, for the Palestinians? That's what I want to see. We need to, we need to look at issues individually instead of as Democrats or Republicans. Set your ego aside. Look at issues independently instead of just making decisions based on loyalty or hatred for the other party. That's where we're going wrong. That's what needs to change. That's what needs to be different. It has become so ridiculous. And, it was really, I think we have to really consider how much social media has affected politics. 20 years ago, it wasn't the same. Social media wasn't a thing. And it has just gradually become such a huge part in everyday lives around the world. Don't get me wrong. I think there's definitely a positive to people being able to communicate via the internet with people all over the world. Instantaneous communication. It's great. But coupled with, the lack of humility in people's egos, and entitlement, and just, it's just become fucking ridiculous. It's become so ridiculous. So I think shutting USAID down, I think that was a good thing Trump has done. Trump and Elon. And people say, President Elon, give me a fucking break. I saw Don Lemon talking about this with somebody, evidently just some random guy on the street, saying, well, Google Don Lemon, or Google President Elon. Well, of course they're going to have, and the guy cited all these different media outlets. They were almost all Democrat. It's like, just because there are a bunch of liberals out there saying that Elon is running the show and that he's actually president and that Trump is listening to, come on, give me a break. It's like on one breath they say Trump won't listen to anybody and he's got the biggest ego in the world, which I think there's some truth to that. In the next breath, they're saying that he's letting Elon Musk run the country. I think that he has given Elon Musk a real role in government efficiency. But I think the idea that Elon Musk is the president is fucking stupid. And Don Lemon, sometimes I like listening to Don Lemon's interviews with people, but he's kind of a retard. The guy's kind of a fucking idiot. He's just charged, and he's so liberal. He's just charged, and he starts making some of these really, really stupid comments and points that he to me just makes himself look like an idiot. Kind of like the got it guy all over TikTok and YouTube. And so the right wants to got it. The guy's such a flippin' idiot, and like 1 in 20 points he makes is intelligent. Just about every point, every got it he makes is completely idiotic. The guy's just a moron. The guy is just absolute moron. So anyway, USAID, that's what I've got to say about it. And I say this is one of the best moves Trump has made in both his first term and the beginning of this term. Like, subscribe, comment below. Until next time.